the middle of
What?
You're going to eat in the middle of the podcast?
Dude, I don't know, it's just dark chocolate. I'm not going to be, like, smacking or anything. Hey, guys, this is the Beyond the Dojo podcast.
I'm Jeremiah.
I'm Lauren. I forgot that part. You distracted me.
Yeah. All right.
Jeremiah wanted to share a story about almost killing someone. The floor is yours.
I wouldn't say I was about to kill somebody, but... So we went on vacation this past weekend, and the area we stayed in was a lot more populated than normal. In the past years, it's been like maybe 3/4 of the people that were there this time. It seemed like there was a big jump.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was partly because, everybody coming off a lockdown, ready to get out of the house, ready to do things. It being Father's Day weekend, those kind of things. So Lauren and I had to go, and we went into town and was coming back, and she was in front of me in her mom's car, and I was in our car. And as we go over the cross bridge to get onto the island we were on, a guy decides he's going to cut me off. No big deal. If you don't know where you're going and you don't know what's going on, traffic, things like that happen. So guy cuts me off, no big deal. We get to the red light. We make a right. He makes a right. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. We get almost to where we're turning into the place where we were staying. And he decides, again, to cut me off to make that left turn.
I saw them behind me and actually thought that they had gotten into an accident because he was so close and so slowly pulling into the lane.
Right. So he pulls into the same facility we're going to, and there's a parking spot right to the right there. And he decides he turns his turn signal for the first time when it was going on, and to make that right turn. And I let him, go ahead and get the parking spot, but he was incapable of making it work. Like, I guess he was too far ahead or whatever. He was unable to do it. So
I'm watching behind me the whole time. Like, Jeremiah, just go around the guy. He's obviously just going to take your parking spot.
Right, so he stops like he doesn't know what to do, and I'm waiting for him. So I decide, okay, well, I'll just go around him.
This is after I got out of the car to tell you, Jeremiah, come around him. There's a parking spot up here.
Right. So as I go around him, he pulls out and speeds up in front of me and cuts me off again.
Comes right up behind my car. So I had to get out and walk up to the car, and I'm like, hey, I'm saving this spot for my husband. I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to him. It's to save this spot because we were trying to get out of your way because you were trying to park.
Right.
And he says, oh, no, I'm going to park right there.
Right. But I see that interaction happen, so I go ahead and I pull into a parking spot that was actually closer to me. Pull in, no big deal. He gets out of the car and looks at me and goes, is there a problem? And
you're gonna have one.
I looked at him and I wanted to say multiple things, and I decided that you need to learn how to drive. I had some explicit adjectives added in there, but that was the gist of it. You need to learn how to drive.
So the moral of the story is...
Wait. It gets better.
I was going to share.
I walked past him to get into the car with Lauren so we could go to the back side of the property there. And he asked me again, is there a problem? So I made sure he understood clearly that he needs to learn how to drive. You need to learn how to drive. Do you want to do something about it? The kind of game that looked like, not backing down, dude. I'm not going to cower to you. Yes, you're Russian. I don't care.
He's Russian.
And I'm just staring at him like, what are you going to do about it? He says, well, says something, and then he kind of cowers and walks off. Moral of the story is this, and I think my father said it best when I told him about it. He goes, my dad says, I'm glad I'm not getting called from the jail.
Moral of the story is, good thing we train karate and we're very calm and know that we could hurt little people.
Right. It's that Budo that everybody talks about. That calming of your inner anger and looking at the situation and analyzing it and what can be done and what can't be done. Is it worth it? Is it worth it in the big picture? And, for those of our students that listen to the podcast, that I'm surprised actually more listen to it than I thought. I thought I'd maybe one or two, but I guess a lot more do. The moral of the story is this. Trust your thought process. Don't rush into things, and don't allow your emotions to take over in a situation that you don't need to. Just calm yourself down, look at it, analyze the situation, make sure you're in a position of power and authority so you're not going to be compromised in distant timing or angles, and then don't back down. Because a lot of times the ones that bark the loudest, they're just barking because they have nothing else they have. They can't do anything else. So they want to try to scare you into thinking they're going to do something bad. And they're not.
I just want to say that if it was any of the men in my family, there probably would have been more than just a few words, and someone might have got their car rammed into, because I'm telling you, this dude had it coming.
Yeah, he was extremely aggressive, and just, it's weird because a lot of times when you meet people who, and he had a really strong Russian accent, so I'm going to assume he wasn't raised in the States. I'm going to assume that he's visiting or whatever. Normally, foreigners don't have that kind of entitlement. I never ran across that in my personal experience. Normally they're like, I don't understand. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. But this guy was like deliberately being extremely aggressive with his driving and his attitude and everything else. So that was the first.
Yep.
Normally we like to start podcasts off with like this hee ha ha stuff. But I think it was appropriate to talk about this because tell this stories because the topic of the podcast today is disciplinary action with students and how to train their parents.
Yeah, how we go about disciplining children in the dojo. Not the whipping kind, even though some of the parents do ask us, "Will you spank my child?" And we're like, "No, we will not do that." But maybe let's talk about first, like, if we're going to talk about like just regular disciplinary action, what kind of things do you feel like constitutes disciplinary action when it comes to students in the dojo? And we're saying children, like, this is generally
6 to 12-year-olds.
Generally, this is from the age of 4 to about 7. Okay. We rarely have to do anything like this with anybody over the age of 7. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they're usually disciplined enough. You just get onto them a couple times and they're usually fine.
Right.
But it does go all the way up to 12 years old if for some reason there is a case like that.
Everybody has a bad day.
Sure.
Every child has a bad day. Everybody, they get to a point where they just don't want to do it.
Right.
They're really good kids. I mean, we're not calling any of our kids out because deep down inside we know that all of them are really good kids.
Right.
That they just have bad days on occasion.
Right.
But I feel like our system kind of dictates that. They understand what the system is.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, when we're talking about like a singular student, like doing something where they're actually breaking the rules. I mean, usually it's going to be the younger students because they're just they're not with it yet. They maybe don't understand the class structure, or they just don't know how to handle themselves well enough to be able to tone it down and not act crazy. So what kind of actions, name off a couple of actions or situations where you think that would kind of constitute disciplinary action on our part?
Direct disobedience. So we tell you to do something and you decide not to.
Okay.
Whatever that situation is, we're doing front kicks, you want to do front step and punch, or you want to do whatever you want to, or if it's time to work, because we use the work play idea a lot. At least I do. It's like, all right, it's time to work, guys. Let's get serious. Let's do this work so we can play later. Right. If it's a direct disobedience, we will definitely call them out. Or at least I will. I'll call them out. Hey, you need to do something different about it. Don't do this. Don't do that. For example, yesterday's class, we have kids. Dude, kids love to look at themselves in the mirrors. That is just a fact. Every kid we have has looked at themselves and made faces.
Especially like 7-year-old boys are obsessed with themselves.
Right. And that's okay. I don't want them to stop that. I mean, it's kind of whatever. It's a phase, right?
Yeah.
But we have to make sure they understand that when we work, and when we play, we play. Mm-hmm. And that was one of those situations. I told the child, hey, do not stare at yourself in the mirror. Stay focused. We're working now.
Sure.
Pay attention to this. Mm-hmm. Let it go by. He would glance a little bit and then kind of stop and glance a little bit and kind of stop. I guess he was testing the waters to see if I was watching. Mm. So when he turned his head and looked, I said, you do it again, 5 push-ups. Mm. And I don't like using push-ups as a disciplinary action, but for this particular child, there has to be some kind of like physical activity related to it so that they understand they're doing something wrong.
Sure.
Because if you talk to him and say it over again, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, he's going to look at you, say, yes, sir, I'm sorry, and then do it exactly the next opportunity.
Right.
That's just his personality. Most kids, generally when you tell them don't do it, third warning, you give them a little, some kind of disciplinary action, and they're fine. And a lot of times that's just taking playtime away.
Sure.
Like, you lost 3 minutes of playtime.
Yeah, well, we'll get into what we actually do in a minute. But if you're looking at a student and you feel like they're deliberately disobeying or they're being defiant, how do you determine between someone just not understanding what's being asked of them and the wires getting crossed versus someone actually deliberately going against what you've said?
I clarify my directions. I make sure they understand what I'm asking. Mm-hmm. So even if it breaks down, do you understand? I don't want you to look at the mirror. Mm-hmm. Do you understand that? Yes. Okay, if you look at it again, this is what's going to happen. Do you understand that? And I make them say yes. A nod of the head is unacceptable. They have to verbalize yes or no.
Right.
And part of that is to, it seems like for some children, when they verbalize, I agree, it's like they hold themselves accountable to it.
Sure.
Like it has to be verbalized. Because I think sometimes I think a nod is, kind of, sort of.
Right.
I didn't really agree. I just nodded my head.
Right.
And...
So one thing I've noticed sometimes is, especially when students are particularly uncoordinated, which happens a lot with the students who are younger, you'll ask them to do a punch, you'll practice a bunch of kicks, and then you have them do punches, and for some reason they get so stuck on doing the kicks, they can't stop doing the kicks. And it's like they go to step forward, and rather than just doing a normal step, now all of a sudden they've got this pattern ingrained where now they're picking their leg up, and you're trying to stop them from kicking, and it takes 3-4 repetitions before they finally get it. So in situations like that, do you feel like, hey, let's give them another chance because they're actually trying, or do you feel like, hey, you should be able to get this from the get-go?
I agree with what you're saying there. That to me is not a direct disobedience.
Right. Okay.
That to me is them trying to figure it out. Right. So if I say don't kick, just step and punch, and they still kind of kick, I say multiple times. I remind them that we're doing something different.
Right.
That this is a step and punch and not a kick. And then I'll give coaching points like slide your foot. Don't step over something.
Right.
That's a kick.
Right.
And after about, 10, 15 reps, they generally get to the point where oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right? I use repetitions to reinforce our directions, though. I don't say don't kick, and then we hit our number of repetitions and we move on to something else.
Right.
If they don't get it, I will rep it out 20, 30 times. I've done a whole class on step and punch because either someone refused to do what I was asking, or they just didn't make the connection. And repetitions are not bad. They're a tool. They're a tool to reinforce what you're teaching.
Right.
So making them rep it out over and over again at a younger age, it helps them understand what we're doing.
And that's always just so lovely as a class when you're taking the entire class and having them all repeat the same thing over and over again, specifically because 1 or 2 people are not falling in line.
Absolutely.
But that is kind of part of karate class structure.
Right, and it is part of discipline.
Right.
Because the kids that are doing it right, they have to be disciplined to continue doing it right.
Even though they're doing it right, and it's somebody else's fault.
Right. Because what will happen is some people will do a really good job for the first half, and then they get upset, and they start doing something else.
Right.
And then you got to look at them like, you're not doing what I'm asking to.
Right. So this is kind of one of those teaching moments in karate where you learn all these crazy life lessons in karate, which doesn't seem like it would make sense that you would learn all this stuff. But that's one of those moments where kids learn life's not fair.
Right.
So just because you did it right, the whole class is going to continue to do it because somebody else did it wrong. Obviously, it's not your fault. And sometimes, for me, that it does irk me sometimes because I'm like, I want this student to be able to continue on.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we do have to get past that point, and we can't always punish the entire class because one person did it wrong. But in a lot of cases, you do it that way, just to make sure that there is in-class accountability, but then to also teach, life's not fair. Sometimes you have to rep stuff out that you don't really want to rep out.
When it comes to discipline, my favorite saying is discipline's in the details.
Right.
It's the small things that matter. And in those situations, the small thing is, I know I did it right. But now I got to keep on doing it right so I don't mess it up.
Right.
And I don't become the person that we have, because of me, I have to do more work.
And I do want to kind of go back to that for a second, because part of the difficulty in, if a student is appearing uncoordinated or is sticking on a previous technique and they're not switching over to something new, or they're doing the wrong thing, sometimes the difficulty is that you have a student who generally is a defiant student who is now having this issue. So now as a teacher, you have to make that judgment call. Are they actually being defiant because they normally are a defiant little turd? Or are they actually trying now, and it's not actually their fault? And sometimes that's a really hard call to make.
Yeah, well, for me, I rely on the nonverbal cues.
Yeah.
So generally when they're defiant, most kids have a certain look or a certain posture that they'll kind of make. And I really key on that, because the defiance is not normally what they're saying or how the action is defiant, but it's how they hold themselves when they do it. And I look at their posturing and their facial expressions. And then when I watch them do, I use that as like a measuring stick on if they're having difficulty or not. Because sometimes when they're having difficulty, you could tell that they're frustrated.
Right.
Their facial expression, their body language, everything about it, they're frustrated.
Yeah.
When they're defiant, they're almost victorious in their posturing. Like, sure. I got this. What you gonna do, kind of thing. And that's as an instructor falls on you. You have to be more observant on what your students are doing, and not only what they're saying or acting out, but how they hold themselves physically. Because physical, nonverbal language or nonverbal communication generally is truthful.
Right.
It's really hard for young kids to kind of lie about that.
Yeah.
Now, as you get older, it's obvious that you can manipulate that, but at a younger age, it's hard. And you could rely on that. That's something I feel like is very truthful at a young age. So,
the other factor that plays into that is whenever students are just not paying attention.
Yeah.
Like, they're not even deliberately being defiant. They're just not paying attention. And we're not talking about being distracted, like ADHD type stuff. We're like literally just
checked
off in, they're just not here. They're just off in la la land. So, how do you normally, what indicators do you normally get of that, of when a student is just checked out?
Eyes are glazed over. When you're talking to them, they're not even looking at you. They're kind of like off to the side a little bit. When they're doing their body movement, their nonverbal actions are very lazy and just kind of doing whatever. If you know your students, you know their average performance, like them just kind of trying but not really trying really hard. I use that as the gauge.
Okay.
So if they're kind of sloppy, and when they're kind of trying, then I say, okay, that's their median, right? And then when I watch them start to perform below that, then I start to watch to see what they're doing. Like, are they doing karate and kind of doing the moves but staring off in the mirror or staring off at the sky? Or, you can see like their mind is turning, but it's not on what they're doing.
Just a quick anecdote on this. A number of years ago, I had a student that I was working with, and he is autistic. He's on the autistic spectrum. But I asked him one day, I said...
Diagnosed.
Diagnosed autistic. So he's like not paying attention, whatever he was doing. He was in a homeschools class, and I said, what's going on in La La Land right now? And he said, I was about to jump into a puddle of water. Thank you for being honest. Okay, that was the first. So definitely they're imagining something.
Right. So at the younger classes, we kind of let that fly a little bit because they're young, and that's what normally kids do at that age. But as they go up in rank and age, that becomes something that we need to tell them to kind of rear back down and control.
Well, let's kind of differentiate that a little bit between classes. So, because how I discipline 4 and 5 versus how you discipline 6 to 8 versus how we do 9 to 12 is not really the same.
No, it's not.
So let's talk about 4 and 5. So the thing with the 4 and 5-year-olds is because most of them have never been in a class before, some of them are not even in school yet, the expectations are a little bit different. They are going to be fidgety. They're not going to be perfect. They're definitely not going to get the form or the movements correct. If they even end up in the ballpark of some of the movements, then I'm pretty much happy. The ones who are more advanced will focus on more technical stuff. Right. But to me, that's not necessarily a discipline issue. It only is, like kind of like you said, like if I've seen the student do it in the past and it's clear that they're just having a day where they're not doing it, one of two things could be happening. They could be having a really bad day, or they're just not trying and they're off in La La Land or whatever. Usually in that case is when I'll start to introduce disciplinary action. If they're really not trying, whatever, I will go that route. And I have had parents bring their kids in and they'll say, well, my kid is having a bad day. I understand that, and I do take that into account. But I also, if I'm going to be consistent, even if they are not consistent, if my job is to be consistent, even if they have a bad day, I still have to keep some structure in place. Right. The structure is very loose because they're 4 and 5 years old, but the structure has to stay there. So if the rule is you're not allowed to fall down on the floor, which is one of our rules, you're not allowed to fall down on the floor. The kids think that's hilarious. So once one student falls down, everyone wants to fall down. So we have a rule, no one's allowed to fall down on the floor in the middle of class, whether intentional or in some cases unintentional, but that's pretty rare. Yeah. So if a student is having one of those days where they decide they're just going to throw themselves on the floor, they're going to spin in a circle, whatever, they're just having a off day, they didn't sleep well, it doesn't matter. I still have to discipline that student. Now sometimes I will give them a couple of extra tries. Right. Normally, we'll talk about our system in just a minute, but normally we have like a certain number of times before, that's it, you need to get off the floor, especially if you're being really defiant. If they're having a bad day, I will give them a little leeway. But the idea and the principle is still there. You can't do this. This is the rule. If you keep breaking it, I'm going to call you out every time, and you're going to get disciplined for it. I guess just with the 4 and 5-year-olds, it's more like I don't expect them to be ramrod straight and stick totally still. When we're having a conversation, like when we bow in, and then we ask kids how their day is going. With the older kids, they're able to sit still. 4 and 5-year-olds, they're fidgeting. Sometimes they want to spin in a circle. They want to move around. They want to talk. So, like, I don't let the other kids talk while one person's telling me about their day.
Right.
And I don't let them spin in a circle, but they are going to move. There's just no way around it. They're going to be moving, fidgeting, whatever. So that kind of stuff is taken into account. So how do you normally handle that with the 6 to 8-year-olds?
So the 6 to 8-year-olds, it's a little bit different. They should understand class structure.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to make the crackles not go into the mic.
So the structure is a little bit stricter. The emphasis on the 6 to 8-year-olds is generally direction giving and receiving. So we make it very, I want to say defined, very detailed instructions. So
Try to be clear.
As super clear as possible. So, if, for example, left leg forward front stance. I don't allow the kids to take their right leg and step back. Because that's not left leg forward, that's right leg back.
Right.
Even though the shape's the same, even though everything else is the same, it's the detailed instructions at that level that is more important than anything else.
Right.
So when I do that, I make sure they understand that. And if they don't do it correctly, they all stand up and redo it. And normally I give it like 2 to 3 times of not calling anybody out before I say anything. But after the 3rd or 4th, I'm like, I'll look at them and stare into their soul and say, left leg forward. And generally, oh, that's me. I got to make sure I do that. Right? And good kids, they'll catch on.
They're thinking, oh, I'm ending up with my left leg forward. It's fine.
Right.
And we're like,
no, it's this.
Precisely this.
Right. It's like knee to chest, not chest to knee. And front kick, everybody understands that. Right? But the left leg forward, right leg back thing, they whatever, it's the same. No, it's not whatever. It is exactly what it needs to be. And that it goes back to that saying, discipline's in the details.
Right.
It's the small details that make you disciplined in everything you do. So, in that class, it's all about following directions. And the directions can be karate orientated. Like when we do front kicks, we have 4 elements: up, out, back, and down. Knee up, foot out, foot back, down. And a lot of times they'll get 3 out of the 4. And each person generally will have a different one missing, right? But that is a way of us saying, hey, these are the directions. Do them exactly.
Right.
It helps their karate. It makes us feel good because we don't feel like we're just disciplinarians. We're actually teaching something.
Right.
And then it allows us to even make it more advanced. So down should not be falling down. Down is placing your foot where you want it. Don't make any noise. Things like that causes them to control their body. Right. And that to me is more karate-esque.
Well, what about like if we're talking about like student defiance and things that would be considered like outside of what we're asking them to do? What normally happens with 6 to 8-year-olds and how much leeway do you give them? Right.
So with 6 to 8-year-olds, less leeway than the 4 to 6-year-olds or 5-year-olds. Basically, I give an instruction. They don't do it correctly. I have everybody else stand back up. They redo it. They do it 3 times in a row where they decide they don't want to do it. I'll look at them and tell them the correction.
Right.
When that doesn't work, I will literally call their name, look at them, and by that time, generally, everybody's looking at them. Like, everybody's looking at them.
Why are you not doing it right?
Right. And then I will say, you need to do this. Do you understand what I'm asking you to do?
Well, the beauty of this is that with 4 and 5-year-olds, when one person is bad, usually it brings the whole class down. But with the 6 to 8-year-olds, when one person is bad, the rest of the class is like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
so it usually is flipping by that point.
Right. So they usually will either correct themselves or they will be defiant, and you will see the defiance in their body posture and in their face. And that's when I add other things, whatever necessary. Not every student gets the same kind of disciplinary action. Some students need it, like I was saying earlier, need that physical reinforcement of what they're doing,
right?
Because the words just don't affect them. Some other students, a good scolding, like not like you horrible, but like firm voice, and this is what we're asking for. We're working right now. Do you understand that? What work is? Yes, I know, and we make them kind of have this yes, no conversation with us so that they understand what's going on, but we're not putting them down or demeaning them in any manner. We're just very firm about what we say, and we have a very firm tone in our face and body posturing.
Yeah.
I'm a big dude, so it's easy for me to kind of make them feel a little bit, intimidated because I'm so much bigger.
Yeah. But the conversation is so clear. Like,
right.
when these conversations are had, whenever you're verbally getting on to a child, like, as an adult, I'm just thinking, like, it's like nails on a chalkboard, because it's like, when you have I don't know, when you're receiving that kind of conversation, it's like, right and wrong, but you're not doing it. So with a kid, it's probably not quite that cringeworthy, right. but they need it broken down to that right. level. Like, do you understand this? Yes, I understand this. This is what I'm asking. Do you understand that? Yes, I understand that. Do you understand that this is not what you did? Yes, I understand that. Now, what are you going to do different? Like, literally going through that process as, like,
the worst statement. The worst statement I make during those conversations is, don't do that.
Right.
It's clear that I don't want you to do it, but now I'm telling you, do not do that.
Right.
That's the line in the sand. Then the next step is, basically, we get the parents involved.
Right.
So I'll literally give sometimes 2 water breaks in an hour class if I have to have that conversation with the parent.
Right.
The second water break, generally I take the student over to the parent. I explain to what's going on.
You want to come back to that in a second whenever we talk about disciplinary action?
No, I get that, but let me finish.
Oh, okay.
All right,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Control freak.
Whatever.
Yeah, that's really professional. I'll talk to the parent and say, hey, this is what's happening. Do you see it? Yes. I need you to talk to him about that to make sure he understands what I'm asking him to do or her to do, and then I walk away. And what I'm doing is I'm involving the parent at that level before we ask him off the class.
Yeah.
That's the step before I go, all right, your kid's got to go. He's done for the day.
Which is very rare.
Very rare. Once in the whole time we've been open. I kicked a kid out of class. Me personally.
Okay, I kicked a kid out as well. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, me personally, and that was because
a couple times, actually.
The kid kicked me, like literally kicked me in the groin. Or tried to, at least. So that was the only time. Most of the times our talks and our actions kind of brings them back in, Right. They might not have the greatest class for the rest of the class, but they're better than what they started. So that being said, that's the 6 to 8-year-olds. The 9 to 12-year-olds, it gets even stricter.
Yeah, but once again, rare that we have issues.
Right. The age there, now it's very clear. I'm not giving you 2 to 3 tries. Now it's like 1 or 2. Get in the game here. Let's go. Focus. And then from there, we move on. And like you said, it's rare that by 9 to 12, if they've been in our program for at least a year, at least 1 year, they have no issues.
Even less than that in some cases. Well, and what's funny about this is, like, okay, so...
Worst case scenario, I'm saying, like, the worst child coming in.
Sure.
It usually takes, within a year, they kind of get it.
Yeah.
Normal cases, dude, within, like, 2 months... Some cases, like the first week, they're like, I don't like that. I'm not, and they're fine. But that's because they have a disciplined home life.
And what's funny is, like, so, like, in the 4 and 5-year-olds, one kid is bad, everyone wants to be bad.
Right.
6 to 8-year-olds, one kid is bad, everyone's like, what are you doing? 9 to 12-year-olds, one kid is bad, and then he feels bad for being bad. So, like, it's already on himself in a lot of cases.
Absolutely.
And it only takes, like, pointing it out in most cases.
Yeah, in most cases.
For them to fix it.
Right. And then... discipline and expectations rise as you move up in rank also.
Right. So we have our intermediates actually separate from our beginners in the 9 to 12-year-olds section.
So. And that's when it becomes even stricter, because these kids, they're getting closer to brown belt and black belt level, and they're kind of getting to that point where you have to seriously train.
Yeah.
Back in the day, most dojos ran it, you got on the floor, you were serious from day one. Today's culture and the way the kids are today, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that big of a dojo. You're not going to be able to sustain yourself. Secondly...
I would say one thing against that, though. It's not like we're playing games with the kids the whole time. They're training hard. It's just not like that serious attitude.
Right.
You're just having a fun attitude while you're training hard.
Yeah, what I meant by that is an obvious separation from 9 to 12 beginners, or beginner level to intermediate level.
Right.
Where the expectations and how you train is different.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I get that.
That's a very obvious thing.
Yeah.
And, and that's the lessons start to change there, too, because during that intermediate level is when most people quit, basically, because it becomes more detailed. becomes more. There's more expectations and the standards higher.
Yeah.
And that's how we create these kids or coach these kids up to this point where they recognize good technique, they recognize when they're not doing it, and they're able to kind of push themselves. You know, it's difficult at times because sometimes they just want to come and play. They're still 9 to 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
They're still kids.
Yeah.
But they have to once again learn that not everything's games, not everything's fun, that this is hard, but if you want to achieve your goals, you got to kind of work hard at it.
I think what he meant to say is we're creating machines is what we're doing.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to say that because that's not my intention. I really didn't want to say create either because that's a horrible word. I was literally, it's coaching. We're trying to coach these kids. You know, you ever seen that meme that goes, you know, coachable kids, uncoachable kids become uncoachable, you know, employees and adults and blah blah. It kind of falls through life, and that's true, right? So as coaches, we want them to be successful in the art that we do in the sport we coach. Really young, right? But at the same time, we want them to mature as human beings also, and be able to say, yeah, this is something I'm doing and it's hard, but it's not always going to be hard. And it's worth the work, and those things are really important. So at the 9 to 12-year-old intermediate level, we definitely have a distinct, like, standard is expected higher, detailed in the technique is higher, required of memorization. Like, when you get to my intermediate class, the first thing we do for the first maybe 3 weeks or so is we go over all the katas that you already know.
Sure.
Right? And I will tell them, you have to know these katas by heart. You can't just focus on your test kata, because you know there's a lot of kids that are great testers and they'll focus on that subject for that time, but then they'll forget all the other katas or all the other things they've already learned. And it's always this, you get this, like, you know, you're just running, you're spinning your wheels in mud, you know, just spinning your wheels. So I force them to make sure they understand that they have to remember their katas. Have to.
Right.
You know, and that's when the old school approach is like, we'll do a combo, and if that child performs the combo correctly for 10 repetitions, I'll let that child move on to a different combo. If that child does not meet those requirements, they continue to do that combo over and over again until they do get it. My expectations is if they hit it 70 to 80% of the time, then I'll let them move forward.
Right.
You know? But the kid, if he's only hitting 30, 40, 50, 60, it doesn't matter to me. If it's not 70 or 80, they have to redo it.
Right.
Cool thing about that I never expected is that some of these kids have this innate competitive personality. Like, they don't really show it all the time, but then all of a sudden you see it, you're like, oh, wow, right? And it has worked out well because we're so structured in our approach that when we add competitiveness to it, no one wants to be doing the same combo over when everybody else is moving forward. Right. Because it's every time they do it, they're reminded,
Right. So you're basically creating a structure in this class that continuously, like checks itself as far as discipline.
Right.
Like, it's very rare, other than making the entire class like repeat repetitions, or repeat combinations and stuff like that over and over again, because one or two people are not adhering. For the most part, the class pretty much kind of maintains itself because of just some of the structures that you set in place.
Yeah, well, I will say something about that. I tried all right, not everybody's doing the combo correct, we're going to do it for the rest of the class kind of thing. And at that level, it's detrimental. It doesn't not help at all.
With this particular group of students that we have,
it doesn't. It right now, it is not beneficial at all. But a lot of these kids, because the reason why they're in that class is because they excelled.
Right.
They were not overachievers, but they were strong, and they definitely excelled in what they already did.
Yeah.
So generally, by the time they get to that level, they're the lazy, nonchalant, showing up just to hang out kind of kids usually are weaned out of karate by then. Not by us making them leave, but by their own choice.
Yeah.
You know? So we have these kids that excel, so we put pressure on them. And we really put this individual competitiveness in there. And it is, without a doubt, made the greatest difference in several kids that I thought were, you know, on the brink of quitting every time they showed up. You know, and now it's like they show up, they know what's expected, they know they have to perform. It's not a personal thing. They just have to do it. Right? And that's, at that level, I want to also reiterate, you have to let them know that it's not personal. You got to remind them, hey, I like you as a person. I like who you are. I think you're funny. I think you're, whatever. Mm-hmm. But then you have to say, but you're doing this incorrectly. Not wrong, but incorrectly. This is how it needs to be done. This is how you should perform. And we try to separate their performance from the person. Yeah. And that's difficult for some kids, because some kids, it's so intermingled that they don't know how to separate.
That's difficult for some adults to not take correction and discipline personally. And I mean, that's important. We've talked about that a number of times. It's important to remember that whenever you're being corrected by an instructor, whether it's because you were being bad in class or if it's because your technique is being correct, that's not because we're saying that you're a bad person. It's because you did a specific thing. That's why we try to be very specific about instructions. These are the specific instructions that were given, or this is a specific structure that we always enforce in this class. You broke it in this way, or you did this thing that doesn't line up with that. Do you see that? Okay, yes. Then that's all that we're correcting. We're not correcting who you are as a person.
Right.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how you kind of start off the relationship with a lot of these parents, kind of like introducing them to the discipline, and then how we use our disciplinary measures on different groups of students?
Yeah, so I call it the parental spiel. So we offer two classes free to anybody that's interested. The first class is the introductory class where they learn how to make a fist, do the rising block, all the basic blocks, basic kick, maybe front stance if they're, able to do that. And then either Lauren or I will set aside and start talking to the parents in the lobby. And one of the main things we explain to them is that when we ask a child, or we're disciplining a child, we need you to be on the same page. Mm-hmm. So if we ask them to step off the floor, which is rare, we can't allow you to give them a Twinkie. We're
asking you not to.
We're not. I don't ever said asking. I usually say we don't allow. Let me clarify that. I say we expect you to follow our lead, and that is don't reward the child. Don't let them play on the phone. Don't give them Twinkies.
It's not a water break.
It's not a water break.
Or a Mountain Dew break in some cases. Actually.
Right, and so the parents are like, no, we wouldn't do that. I'm like, listen, and I explained to them, I never thought I'd have to give this spiel. But
it's happened.
But it's happened, and now I have to do it just to make sure everybody understands.
Yes.
When that conversation goes down, majority of the parents understand that this is what was going on. Mm-hmm. In our area, the majority of our parents bring their kids in for discipline.
Specifically for that, yeah.
Specifically for discipline. They don't care about anything else. They just want their child to have more discipline in their life. Mm-hmm. So that's we first start with the child and the parents.
Yeah.
Generally, parents understand our structure. We explain how we do things. The 3-strike rule, where we give the child 3 warnings, and on the 4th time, if they continue to do the same disobedient act, we ask them to step off the floor. We also reiterate that rarely happens.
Right.
That is a rarity that happens because we're trying to teach them discipline. It's unproductive to have them off the floor, to completely dismiss them from a class where we're trying to teach them something.
And I would say that 3 to 4 strike rule, that is a little bit subjective. I've had kids, talking about 4 and 5-year-olds having a bad day.
Yeah.
I have had kids that I will. So their discipline is dying cockroach. They'll lay on their back and they pick their head up and they put their arms and feet up toward the air or toward the ceiling, and they look like a dead bug. So they literally hold that, and it's kind of a shame tactic, but to me it's better than having to do push-ups because they can't do push-ups. Right. So there will be times where a student will do that over and over and over and over and over again, and they'll do it over 3 times, and I won't send them off the floor. In some cases, that's just because what they're doing is mild enough.
Right.
That it doesn't warrant them completely being dismissed from class.
Right.
But it's enough that they're breaking the rules and they have to be disciplined for it. And then the follow-up on that, just to make sure that they understand, is each time they get disciplined, they get a minute off of playtime.
Right.
And in some cases, you only have between 5 and 10 minutes of playtime. So, with the 4 and 5-year-olds, if it's bad enough that I send them off the floor, they get no playtime. And that's very rare. I haven't had that happen in quite some time, but that's generally the structure that we have. Okay, you're going to get disciplined on the floor, and then you're going to have something taken away from you, just to make sure that makes sense. Because sometimes they don't get it. I've had students before who claim they don't understand why they got in trouble. So I will have to sit, while the student is on their timeout from playing games, I will have to sit down with them and ask them, do you understand why you got in trouble? No. And then I have to explain to them, this is a rule that you broke. This is what you did. I asked you to not do it. You did it again. This is why you're in trouble. Do you understand that now? Yes, they claim that, but then they'll come and break it again.
Right.
So, that's one of those where it's a little bit subjective and case by case,
Right.
but that's kind of the perspective that we take. It's like, you break the rule, we decide how mild or how heavy it is, and then decide what action to take after that.
Yeah. With the spiel, the parental spiel that I give them, I also remind them that we understand that kids have bad days.
Yeah.
And that if your kid has a bad day, it doesn't carry over to the next class. Every class is new.
Right.
That means the slate's clean. You have an opportunity to do whatever you want to do and however you want to, perform to your best. Mm-hmm. But I will also say, if the same act of disobedience reoccurs over 3 classes, we will have a conference with you and your child, and we'll discuss a structure that will work for both of you. We involve our parents in the disciplinary acts once it becomes obvious it's a routine thing.
Right.
When it's obviously not just a bad day.
Yeah, and I do want to say this, because I think we've talked about this before. We want the parents to be involved, and if our disciplinary methods are not working, then we're asking the parents to step in. But if we disciplined a child and it obviously worked and the kid is okay and everything's fine and dandy, they're in class, they continue on, they finish the class, at that point, we would not expect a parent to then further discipline a child, because we feel like it's kind of been taken care of.
Right.
It's when it falls outside of our bounds and it's happening over and over again, or it just wasn't resolved in class. That's the kind of the point when we would expect parents to step in, not like we already did our job and then you're going to kind of follow up on that. I feel like that's a little bit overboard.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because that could be misunderstood. Right?
Yeah.
No, that's not how we do it. I mean, like we said, dude, what's funny is, like, these parents, man, they watch us how we do discipline and how we structure our class and how we treat their kids and how their kids respond. I think it's almost astonishing to some of them how they respond in a positive way. Even though they know they're in trouble, they still respond like, you know what, that was what we agreed upon, and that's what we said, and this is what happened.
Right.
Kids love structure. They don't verbalize, I want to be in a structured, like, environment, but it's, to them, I believe it's safety.
Yep.
They know what they can and cannot do.
Right.
And then they just kind of do whatever they want within those allowable spectrum.
Right, and kids are already confused about what's going on in the real world anyway. If you can provide some clarity and keep the emotion out of it, and sometimes that gets difficult because some kids will piss you off.
Right.
But if as long as you can make it not an emotional thing, it's not an attack on their character, and the lines are very clear and they understand where they are, definitely think it's a safety thing. Like they know how far they can go and how far they can push the envelope before now you've broken a rule.
So some of the structure that we have is like, in my classes, game time isn't given, it's earned. So, and I tell them, if the whole class performs well and you do a great job and we hit the marks that I want to hit in the class, repetitions, technique, whatever, you could have up to 15 minutes of game time at the end of the class. If you don't hit that and you kind of hit it once in a while, or you did an okay job, you might still have playtime, but it's not going to be 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It might be 10 minutes. I said, but if you if the class is just horrible and we can't get anything done, you've already had your game time.
Yeah.
And we still have work to do. And that's kind of, they understand that. Secondly, when we play games, there's certain rules that are reiterated every time. One of them is you can't hit anybody in the face, obviously. Duh, right? But we play sword fight, or we do dodgeball and things like that.
Lightsaber battle.
Lightsaber battles, whatever. And the clarification of not getting hit in the face, it doesn't matter if it's accidental or intentional. You cannot hit anybody in the face. And some of these, what's cool about the 9 and 12-year-olds is like they govern themselves so much that a kid will throw a ball and another kid will bend down to grab a ball and it'll hit the kid in the face. Complete accidental, right? But they will look at me like, oh my gosh, and walk straight over to the wall. So they know they have to sit down and sit out of it, right? And it's like you want to go inside and like, yes. But, you got to look at him and you know why? Yes, I know why. And I said, it didn't look like it was an accident. Did you make sure you said, I'm sorry? And he goes, yes, sir. They would tell me, I did the right thing and I'm good. And then generally if they self-govern themselves or govern themselves like that, they know that their timeout is like cut in half.
Right.
They know that. I think that's part of the reward is like, all right, I'm honest about what I'm doing. So yeah, I usually tell them you have to sit down a minute. The first offense, sit down a minute. Second offense, you're done for the day. And generally, they'll call themselves, yeah, I did, sorry. They'll sit down. I'll talk to them about it. I'll look at the clock. I'll go 1. I'll count the 10 in my head. All right, get up. Don't do it again. And then let them play.
Yeah.
It's structure is there for the child's benefit, but that structure is also, you're able to break that structure and mold that structure to situations because you're the sensei, you're the teacher. You should know what, is fair. You got to be fair. That's the thing with almost all the kids is you got to be fair. All the rules apply to everybody. Doesn't matter if the kid's a star student or if he has, his entire family's in the dojo and they're paying the majority of the tuition and all that.
Or even if a student has a disability. In a lot of cases, their parents are bringing them to us specifically for discipline and for socialization, and they have to be held to the same standard. Absolutely. Obviously, with some
more
grace.
Patient, yeah,
right. But they're still held to the same standards.
Absolutely. And that, I think, what most people misunderstand about disabled adults, children, everything, is everybody treats them special, and that's not what they want. They want to be treated like everybody else. They just want a little bit more patience.
Right.
That's
How are
all.
they supposed to learn normalcy or functioning in everyday life if they're not treated normally in a safe place like a dojo?
Right.
That's just kind of a side note.
Yeah, side note. And we tend to have a lot of special needs students.
Sure.
And not like parent diagnosed, but like doctor diagnosed.
Yeah, or ADHD, autism, things like that. We've had some Down syndrome students, stuff like that. So.
And that's fine because I think they see that we're going to treat them fair no matter what. If we ask you to do something, you do it. Now, if you're physically incapable of doing that, then that's a whole different. That's different. We show grace. But if you choose not to, that's different, and we don't.
Right.
So, I guess the underlying theme for our disciplinary action towards our students is structure. It's almost like you're writing a contract with them, a verbal contract. And they know their boundaries, and if they choose to cross them, they know they crossed them. It's not a surprise to them. Now, they might act like, oh, I didn't know. Quit your lying, boy. Quit your lying, And I'm that kind of person that I could call someone out and not make them feel like I'm condemning them. Like, dude, come on, man. I know you. I just had this conversation. I was there with the conversation. I was talking to you.
Right.
So you kind of have to have that sternness, but you also have to be brutally honest sometimes. Yeah. Like, just brutally honest. No, we've already had this discussion, right? Yeah. So that's disciplinary with kids. With the adults, interesting, because they're adults. They're not here for disciplinary action. They're here to learn karate or get a workout. And that's when I personally rely on the old school dojo disciplinary actions. Number one rule is if it's good for you, it's good for me in an adult class. And what that means, if you want to push your waiter out and dominate somebody, then when the turn comes around when someone else can dominate you and they do it, I have nothing to say. And I tell them that. I'm like, look, you want to be a bully about what's going on and you want to, be stronger than someone, that's fine. But there's always going to be someone else who has more experience, has more strength, and they might have to do that to you. And I'm going to turn my back and walk away because you kind of deserve it. Be respectful to other people. Be respectful to beginners and older guys. Like, I think it's funny. Sometimes these guys, we have older gentlemen that train with us. And some of these guys think that, they could throw it their weight a little bit and kind of put some power to them. And these old guys, they've trained so long that it's not about physical prowess. It's about the ability, the technique. And it's funny to me because they, one, I've seen literally drop a reverse punch on the dude and, didn't even care. Whack. I was like, good for you, good for me. And I just moved on, right?
Yeah. It's
that whole, you're mature enough, you know what you're doing. You know that you're being a jerk. So, you get treated like one.
Yeah.
Teens, man, we've been so blessed to have good teens. We really have. Our teens are pretty mature, or at least they're mature in karate. So they know their limitations. And, we literally have to urge them on to push the edge sometimes.
Yeah.
Because they're just respectful kids. We haven't had those issues where we have bullies come up, so.
Right. That's been very, very nice.
It's really been nice.
Not having to worry about that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, with the parents, we just make sure they understand our structure, and we don't ever waver from it. It's consistent, class to class. This is what's happening. This is what we expect. It's consistency, and I feel like some of our dojo parents have picked up on what we do and applied it in their own lives and their own families.
Some of them have said that.
And it's It's not perfect, but we're in the right direction. We move in the right direction when it comes to disciplinary actions. Yeah.
Right. Cool. So what you working on?
There's a move in Chinte after the front kick, the front stance to the block like that. I'm working on that move next, the down and around. The subtleties of this minute little subtleties that, our teacher has talked about and shown on video. And it's just crazy to me. Like last night I realized that a lot more of the graceful moves that you see in kata that you think are just like these poses have like different impact points and different things that can happen, and generally they're pretty dang aggressive. Like in their application, you're like, what? I just snapped someone's neck? And it's like,
I got you here. Oh, I got you there.
Yeah, literally, I punched you in the gut, then I smacked you with my forearm, then I wrapped my hand around your neck, and now I'm popping your head like a zip.
And now you're dead.
Right. And it's like, you would never think about that whole like swinging the arm is that way, because we either think about the beginning part of it or the end part. And there's like so much in the middle that you're just like, what?
Yeah.
So those violent little things keep me going in karate. It's like, that's what are you working
on? Apparently I don't know how to front kick.
Me too.
Yeah. So, I guess I feel like I'm trying to drive off of the floor and get my leg up quickly, but apparently I am planar flexing my foot, so dropping it down to push off the floor and not recovering. Yeah. And then I'm kicking with my toes pointing down the whole time. By the end of the kick, my toes are up, but your ankles should articulate throughout the kick, and I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten onto students for that. And apparently I am doing that thing, so that's lovely. So working on that, and just consistency with Fudodachi. I have kind of an idea of what it's supposed to feel like maybe now. The consistency is really difficult on that one. Yeah. And it's funny because whenever I filmed the Chinte, toward the beginning it was actually okay, and then like toward the end it just fell apart and it didn't look like Fudodachi at all. Yeah. So anyhow, still kind of working on that. So there was been a lot of corrections on that kata, so it's hard to keep track of what specifically I'm working on all of it. All
right, so I keep on saying disciplines into the details, and that's kind of where we're at in our karate. It's like our karate our training is so focused on the small details that we realize, we don't do this, we don't do it, but then it's so difficult to rep out the move with all the details. Like be that disciplined to hit every mark of that, that very subtle marks throughout the technique, and it's challenging. It's discouraging. It's extremely rewarding. And it is what karate is to me. It's like that's where we're at now. It's karate. That is karate. Yeah. It used to be tournaments and winning, and then it was power and speed, and now it's like, it's all these other. It's like reading that book over, and the second time you read it, you get more you missed like majority of the plot twist or character flaws, and you're like, now you realize that, and you're like, man, this book has so much more depth and so much more. It makes it more interesting. Right. And I think that's where, in my mind, mastery is efficiency, and a lot of people go, you just got to eliminate all the excessive movement, but it's also efficiency in the movement when in terms of application. How many things can you do in this one movement that would guarantee or make the situation plausible or effective? Yeah. And like we said, that move to swing the arm around, I mean, dude, literally there's 3 different things in one technique in one application. That's just one application. There's multiple applications. He goes, because then he went on to talk about how you could do it against the arm and different things there, and it was like, what?
But you have to do the move correctly first.
Yeah, but the fundamental movement has to be correct for that technique to work. For it to have a universal application.
Or any application.
You could do it wrong and have one application.
Yeah. Okay.
But if it's
to maximize the efficiency.
Maximize the efficiency and have more of a universal movement that multiple applications can come from. Is what I'm saying. I guess that's better. Yeah. So you working on that? We have something special in the works. So we're trying to get a seminar put together for our Florida friends. It's going to be called the Florida Friendship Seminar. Expect to see that from social media within the next week, where we advertise the location, which is pretty dang cool. The town that we're going to be staying in, and the teachers, man, it is going to be Awesome.
So if you're listening to this years down the road, sorry, it's in September 2021.
Yeah, September 2021.
And at the moment, we're trying to emphasize that Florida residents come to this. Nothing against people from outside Florida, but we're trying to bring together different groups in Florida, so they're going to get priority, and then after that, we'll kind of open it up to other people as well.
It's our goal after COVID. We realized that we as a traditional karate group or community, especially the Shotokan people, that's what we do, shouldn't be so fragmented, shouldn't be so isolated. Every town has a karate dojo, and a lot of these towns have Shotokan dojos, and through old politics or whatever, there's no networking amongst us. And we're not trying to change everybody's karate to do what we do. What we're trying to show is that everybody has slightly different karate, and that's okay. It's okay to be different. We could still train together and then share ideas and explore strengths and weaknesses and overall improve your karate for what you want it to be.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, it's difficult. I thought it was going to be easy. I thought the idea would be great. And I'd just, get these people to sign up to teach. And to my surprise...
It's been difficult because of the particular weekend we chose.
I think it's been difficult because of the weekend we chose, but also because there's a stigmata still. There's still a little bit of a stigmata where... Stigma, sorry. Stigma.
I don't know if there really is. I mean, maybe in like one
You're
particular...
not talking to those people.
I know, but
I am. Don't make that comment if you're not the one talking to them.
One person.
No, it's been more than that.
You think so?
I think so. I think some guys are just being polite about it and, I got this and that. And I'm not saying that every one of them are that way. It's just...
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm so like... When I believe in an idea, I believe it wholeheartedly.
Right.
And I'd be like, why don't you believe this? I can't comprehend that someone else...
Why don't you believe what I believe?
Right?
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with your believer?
Dude, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's just hard for me to go, you know what, that's what they're not. Their karate's not about that, and I got to respect that also. So, like I said, within a week or two, you should get some information. We'll post it on our social media.
More than likely, by the time this podcast is published, it'll be out there.
Right. There you go.
So look for it. It might not be on social media just yet, though, because we're going to send it to dojos first to make sure that they get first dibs.
First dibs, basically. All right, well, that's it. Yeah.
That's it.
Done talking to you.
Done. It's
Moving on.
over. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Okay.
Okay.
See you next time.
See you.